The workflow with the incident, one idea to really focus on is that we use alerts and incidents together as it stands now. There is some feedback between Stellar Cyber and our customers, like what would it mean if incidents were a single pane that everyone could look at? And there's some validity there. There's also some complications and whatnot. Like when do you close in it gets complicated is my point. The way it stands today is that they are intended to work together. You're going to have some big, high severity, high alert score, exfiltration and impact, otherwise alerts. And now the SOC team is going to need to feed that in to the overall workflow. And you're also going to have some incidents that each individual alert does not have a high score, but when you have 300 of them, then it is a high scoring alert. Let me give you an example. I was working with a customer and they had their threshold for what constituted a critical alert set to a value, let's say 40. And they did a pen test that generated over 300 alerts, but no individual alert was above their threshold. However, the incident score was in the 90s because all these little itty bitty alerts made a big score incident. Incidents aggregate alerts. Every organization, if we go back to the original process, will have different thresholds based on their risk tolerance and risk nature, risk policy, risk analysis. But there's going to be two different things. There's going to be which alerts must be handled immediately. So we see ransomware on the network, we see DNS tunneling on the network, something in the 90s, boom, we have to respond. So these workflows are a little bit separate. And also the incidents can, if an alert is part of an incident, the incident can provide details, much like the panoramic views and other things can provide some context for the individual alerts. Now, this setting, we are not quite yet making general recommendations, but for individual customers looking at some bigger picture. So we don't have a best practice, but we have some pretty good practices based on experience with a particular customer. If you're looking at incidents, this little gear icon, generally best practice is to set this to 2 or even 3. And that the minimum incident score depends on your organizations. Some organizations 30, some organizations 50, some organizations 70. It's going to depend on your workflow. And this setting will impact what you see here under top incidents on the dashboard, and also what you see. I'm going to hope I get lucky. Oh, I know how to see it. When you are looking at an individual alert, you're looking at this. Oh, that's a scary, scary alert. And you can click and see this. Oh, that's a scary, scary alert. And you can click and see other alerts that are related to it. All right. So what constitutes, in this particular case, if you had that 100 alert with nothing else, I mean, there are just some decisions to be made, is the point. All right. Some other quick bits in dealing with incidents is the alerts dashboard. This is a preference thing, although I am very clear that I prefer the table view for grid. Yeah, table view. It's just more comfortable for me. I can sort things. We also have all these quick filters up here. This is an area, let me just say, that we are a very agile company. We implement a solid base functionality, and then we iterate. If you as a customer and then we iterate. If you as a customer have feedback on what is going to work better for you, please provide that. I'm sure many of you work with Dexter and Ryan who are in the panelist panel. I mean, I'm not going to guarantee that any specific request can be implemented, but given the preponderance of customer feedback, and also if you have a really, really good idea that works for a whole lot of customers, when we ask them, like, what do you think about this? I have seen few companies as responsive to their customers as this one, and it's one of the reasons why I'm proud to work at Stellar Cyber. So please provide that information, and I can't guarantee anything, but we're all in this together. Okay, so looking at an individual incident, we talked about the status. You generally want to set it to in progress or whatnot. I'm not setting this on sales demo because I don't want to mess anybody up. All right, and we talked about the various filters that we have up here. If you are using assignment, assign to me, this is just our first, like, what do our customers going to want? And now, again, tags, I already mentioned that. Now we're going to start investigating. This will be done by the junior SOC analyst, and they may be successful, they may not. They will use these same techniques, but let us just assume there's a second tier. So again, we're going to work right to left. We're going to focus on the big rocks, but instead what we're going to do is we are going to, as potentially senior SOC analysts, we're going to come in and take a look. We're going to set event status not to new, but to in progress. And here, remember those two issues, those USB inserted things? They're just popping right up. Now, some teams do prefer a custom dashboard. Some years ago, we created this analyst view. All right, fine. If that works for you, it's essentially the threat hunting view. Some customers just prefer to use it flipped back. That was interesting. There they are. It's going to depend on your organization. We try to, meet the needs of our customers. Within an individual alert, we've talked about the alert details. 1, check your key fields. This is my workflow. I'll take a look at this. Virus total lookups. If I have a public IP address, which I think this one might, that's awesome. Working in a lab environment, I don't always have a public IP address to play around with. That's that. Oh dear. So the host name was something that I could look up on VirusTotal. But if this was a source IP, look up on VirusTotal. But if this was a source IP, oh, nice. Source IP was a public IP address, then I could also do some reverse lookups. I've done that. Like, okay, who owns that IP address? Oh, Amazon owns that IP address. Quick go double check. Oh, hey, what do you know? That IP address is actually associated with engineering. Let me just say it is sometimes challenging to be a SOC analyst for an engineering department who is building a security product. It gets a little weird sometimes. All right, so we're going to check various key fields. Now, the various other tools. As always, we need to watch our various filters at the top, right? It is very easy, as we saw earlier, to say, have here, and then go back to your home screen and like, okay, let's go look at all open. Wait a minute, nothing changed. So watch your filters, and generally, if we are looking at information on pretty much any screen, some of the key values are going to be some kind of source IP, sometimes it's called host IP, destination IP if it exists. These are going to be key values that we're going to investigate, right? We can dive into the interflow record. In this case, volume snapshot, like what's going on? Maybe this wasn't. What? Is this really a USB thing? This gets down, if you've been to my 101 class, I have a very basic rule for detecting plug and play. So, I get some extra noise in here I can talk about. And in this particular case, I don't have review original records, but I'm going to quick see if I can find one. Gotta clear my filters. We're going to look at all open. All right, original rec, clear my filters. We're going to look at all open. All right, original records. I don't know what this was, but you can investigate. We also have on individual elements, not here, but we have the other tools. Let's go here. All right, source host. We have panoramic view. And this one in particular, you have to pay attention to what your event status is. Maybe even set to all open just to make sure something. And what's your time interval, right? If you are ordinarily looking at every 5 hours, it may be much more interesting to look at what happened over the past 24 hours. So this screen in particular, you'll want to shift your filters just to get a good picture of everything. And also, if you really need to dig deep, there's always original records. In this case, there are 5. And original records. In this case, there are 5. And we'll just have to take a look at what was going on each record. So notice we've now shifted index to something else. And that's going to get more complicated. And we will have to talk about that probably tomorrow. Taking action. So we can add comments. I've already talked about. We can trigger an email to send to our case management system. Blocking on firewall. This is going to require you to understand your network topology, right? Is this specific host actually blocked by that firewall? Disable user. Is this specific user actually in your Active Directory? We are never going to get away from needing to actually know our networks. And I have literally seen this issue for over 20 years. Like you put a firewall between you and your WAN provider, but if you don't know your network, weird things happen. And we still have it, right? So, I'm not sure quite what to say other than we still have to document some of this stuff and we have to pay attention to it. And we need to have network diagrams and network address spaces so that we can figure out what is going on. But you can take actions. Will they work? Well, it depends on your knowledge of the network diagram. If the specific connector you try to choose just doesn't happen to be installed in that particular client, not going to do very much. But also we can just try again. And at the end of the day, we're going to want to close the alert. We had the little bit of conversation earlier about what happens if you close an incident. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the close alert, there are some values we've given you, and you will need to decide what they mean for your organization. So I have these propagations. I investigate. Okay, apparently this is a trigger. I need to adjust my automation rule. This was a false positive, with that shadow copy. It's not actually a USB drive device. All right, so I'm going to bulk event status, or I could just go in and individual event status, doesn't really matter. But what does ignored versus close mean? These are just arbitrary values we've provided you. So my recommendation, and the one I use, is that closed means someone took some action, pretty much of any kind, especially if there was a case created, but someone had to do something, whether that was, contain a host or block on a firewall or power down a host because it didn't have EDR installed on it, whatever. Someone had to do some work. And ignored means I looked at that and I realized, oh, that's just engineering and QA doing testing. Or, oh, that's just because we've been working remotely in a pandemic and that laptop is back on the network for the first time in 6 months. And so, yes, it's perfectly normal that these uncommon applications are showing up from that IP address because that IP address has not been on the network for 6 months. So that's my definition. All right, there's a question. Can endpoint security connector detect suspicious files on the systems in which agent is not installed. I'm afraid I do not understand the question. The endpoint security connector. To me, that sounds like we have an EDR connector and we are asking what a specific EDR vendor can or cannot detect. I don't know, Dexter or Ryan, if you can help me understand the question or answer it. And then the next question, can I revert an ignored action? Yes, you can. Let me show you under the hood. For us, it's all about what we are showing for filters and searches, right? That's our main focus. So these are in status in progress. Let's just take a look at those details. Let's just, well, actually, they may be under actions. Yep, here. It was added a comment, another comment, changed them here. It was added a comment, another comment, changed in progress. Oh, wait a minute, that's not in progress. Show me only things in new. Let's just show stuff in new. Hey, there's that one. Let me show stuff in progress. Oh, there's that other one. So that's what the, for us, the status is about the big data component and making notes and messages, comments to ourselves so we can find stuff later. All right. Which brings us back to the big picture of, we got some analysis to do. A little bit of time. Let's try and finish this off. The incident investigation workflow, some things I want to point out in the incident itself. And a lot of this is going to be actually rather repetitive when we start dealing with alerts. So if we have an incident, let's start with, whatever. Actually rather repetitive when we start dealing with alerts. So if we have an incident, let's start with, whatever incident we want to start with. We have all of these, groupings together, all this cool stuff. But for an individual host, we have a quick pivot, just like we did for an individual alert. We have 360. All right. So the one I really like for real world work is having the whois lookup, but I think some of these addresses are a little bit, internal. But the various tools you have for alerts, we have the 360, you can take a look at this and just, okay, I want to see this late in Zoom, that specific host. Maybe there are some alerts that are not associated with this, and now we hit the canned data problem. So I have seen in the real world where there are alerts that are not a part of the incident with this, and now we hit the canned data problem. So I have seen in the real world where there are alerts that are not a part of the incident, and I find those interesting. So we are able to, from the individual incident, just like we can go from an alert to an incident from the individual entity in the incident, we can still use the same tools that we used to use. The timeline, this is an alert. The problem, not the problem, that's too strong a word. The preference, that's the right word. It has been a design decision that when we are looking at individual incidents, that we will initially make it, all right, we will initially make it be the most recent one first, and you can pop that up. But most of everyone I work with prefer to look at the original one to try and track the story of the initial incident to the most recent incident, from the initial alert to the most recent alert. So, keep your eyes out. There's a possibility it changes. Now, within the alert workspace, we have the individual alerts listed here under the alerts tab. We have our ability to add individual comments. We have our ability to change the alert status. This is technically a current workaround. If you are looking at some alert, oh, this one's above our threshold. All right, I'm going to set this to in progress. In progress does not automatically change the alert status. So we're looking at it, we've assigned it, all that good stuff. come into alerts, just as a short time workaround, come and we'll change our event status to in progress to match. Change it here, change it for the individual alerts. Again, to avoid the repetitive workflow. Other things like the way I am doing it today is I'll add a comment to say all of these are a part of, case 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I used that one already. 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. And then I will also add that as a description. Right. This is, as I said, we are developing with an agile framework. We have put together some amazing GraphML technology, and now we are taking feedback about how to make this effective as a workflow for everyone. All right. So this is how I'm doing it today, and I've already provided mine for everyone. All right. So this is how I'm doing it today, and I've already provided my opinions. Please provide your opinions, and through the, wisdom of the crowds, we'll come up with some good workflows that are more efficient than today. But I'm going to tell you, this is already in many ways way more efficient than 2 years ago. And I'm a total fan. I'm a total fanboy. Could there be little things that could be tweaked to be better? Yeah, of course. But you not everything is perfect all at once. So let's see. We take actions. Here's one area you need to know. Actions at the present time will need to be taken on an individual alert. So this will require your input and understanding that, here I have this thing. Okay, this whole business, maybe there's an individual host or something. We've done some analysis and we are going to contain a host. We can external action, contain a host if it's getting a little late here. CrowdStrike or quarantine threat, block on firewall, different things. At the present time, actions are taken on alerts. So keep your eyes open. There may be some changes to that, but that is how it is done today. And part of that is also just the requirement that in order to automate some of the take action, we need some of these details that are in the individual alert. But in the incident, oh, hey, look, what is what? So they're going to figure that out and make it better. But that's how it's going now. Now, the way it is, the way it is now, when you close out an incident to resolved, it's going to ask you, close it. This comment here, I think in relatively short order, will get added to every alert. That was a strong feedback of yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if you set the status to canceled, we are setting the alerts to ignored. And if you put a comment here, it shows up under history, but bringing that unification together and bringing the back and forth between the two components, this is an area of active development to just make the workflow lower friction. So guys, talk to your SEs and provide the feedback. So there was a question, and 2 questions coming in 2 different places. Can I please explain just briefly what are the session statuses mean? Closed, aborted, half open, no SYN, established, and created. So those are coming up from the basic network engineering, and generally the distinction between TCP state and UDP state and firewall policy. So we'd have to look at where specifically that is coming from. Close generally means that the TCP session was gracefully closed. Aborted generally means that the TCP session was aborted, so not gracefully closed. Half opened, that suggests that that's going to depend on the specific vendor, and no SYN is going to be much the same. Established generally means that there was a 3-way handshake, but I've been reading recently, especially given that amplification attack, because there are some vendors that decided in order to enable essentially the firewall of China, that they would not actually do the full TCP analysis in violation of the RFC. So there's an intermediate state now. And I have to go look at it, and we need to take a look at what specific things mean. Established, created, that's going to be a tricky one. The difference between established and created is going to depend, again, on your individual vendor. So we'd have to look at some specific vendors to figure out what they're reporting for what. And I know it depends is never a very satisfying answer. Unfortunately, it depends. So you're welcome to talk with your SE, and we can try and, this is basically TCP and UDP, how firewall tables work is what we're talking about. So, all right. Is it recommended to remove alerts from the incident that we find false positive? So I'm assuming the question here is, if there is an individual incident that, based on an analysis of the various alerts, that we have decided, okay, yes, those are anomalous, but it wasn't actually malicious behavior. It was one of the many other things, like Bob hasn't been in the office for 6 months, and so a bunch of alerts were generated. I would say no, but I am also aware of other opinions that say yes. And so my personal opinion and what the actual behavior is may not be in 100% sync. And also there may be some changes coming in specific behavior, As I've said, we do try to be agile, and we do try to respond to customer feedback very quickly. I would suggest not actively removing individual alerts from an incident. There was a reason they were linked together. Potentially that specific alert should be marked, and of course I never remember which one it is in the moment, but potentially we come in here and we mark this alert ignored, but I wouldn't necessarily remove it unless for some reason it was very, very clear. Generally, the only alerts I would remove were alerts added by a human being who made a mistake. Those are the only alerts I would suggest removing, because those might mess up other stuff. But, and yeah, we kind of have to end up for today.